Was it China who destabilized and destroyed multiple countries on a global scale? Was it China who performed multiple coups in multiple countries? Was it China who dragged everyone into a pointless war in Afghanistan for decades? No, that was the US.
The Chinese government just had a press conference and announced that the only enemy to America is America itself, which is so true. We are our own cancer.
On Chinese social media, they're calling what's happening in America the Cultural Revolution and saying that the White House sounds even more like the Chinese Communist Party than they do, which is kind of ironic, don't you think?
They rob you blind and you thank them for it. That's a tragedy. That's a scam. That's why I'm saying this right now. Americans, you don't need a tariff. You need a revolution. For decades, your government and oligarchs ship your job to China, not for diplomacy, not for peace, but to exploit cheap laborers. And in the process, they hollowed out your middle class, crushed your working class, and told you to be proud while they sold your future for profit.
When I went to China in the summer for the first time, I stayed in the Guangzhou area, and I wasn't really sure if I should, really leave my hotel or not, but I was so surprised that everyone, including the women, were like, just letting you know, like, if you want to go somewhere, like, don't be worried. Obviously, like, they were so courteous, and the people there were so helpful, because I went there on a work trip as well, but they were like, you could literally go anywhere at night, you'll be fine, you'll be safe, and
today we're diving deep into a cultural phenomenon that's blowing up all over TikTok. Chinese creators and people from across the globe are stepping in to educate Americans about their own country. Yep, you heard that right. While US politicians push narratives and agendas, people from the outside are looking in and asking, do Americans even know what's happening in their own country? From the CCP itself calling out US hypocrisy to TikTok videos comparing Washington to Beijing's old-school propaganda machine, we're cracking this wide open. So grab a drink, get comfy, and let's break it all down.
They rob you blind and you thank them for it. That's a tragedy. That's a scam. That's why I'm saying this right now. Americans, you don't need a tariff. You need a revolution. For decades, your government and oligarchs ship your job to China, not for diplomacy, not for peace, but to exploit cheap laborers. And in the process, they hollowed out your middle class, crushed your working class, and told you to be proud while they sold your future for profit. And yes, China made money, but we used it to build roads, lift millions out of poverty, fund healthcare, raise living standard. We reinvested in our people. My family also benefited from it. What did your oligarchs do? They bought yachts, private jets, mansions with golf course driveways. They manipulate the market, dodged tax, and poured billions into endless wars. And you get stagnated wages, crippling healthcare cost, cheap dopamine, debt, and flag wave property made in China while they pick your pocket. For 40 years, both China and the United States benefit from the trade, the manufacturing, but only one of us use that wealth to build. This isn't China's fault. This is yours. You let this happen. You let the oligarchs feed you lies while they made you fat, poor, and addicted. Now they blame China for mess they made. I don't think so. I don't think you need another tariff. You need to wake up. You need to take your country back. I think you need a revolution.
Many Americans have asked me this question. In China, your working class barely pay any tax, and you don't pay property tax. Where the government got the money to build infrastructure, school, hospital, all these public services? Let me explain to you this way. Imagine now in the United States, the money belongs to bankers, belongs to Wall Street, Federal Reserve, and huge corporations. All this money controlled by your government, and your government represents all your working class farmers, and your government can manage this money. That's how your society can have a low cost of living, and you working class no need to pay so expensive tax. And also, very importantly, those billionaires, those bankers, they do not deserve to hoarding all the money belong to all your Americans. Have you ever think about that? That is differences from socialism and capitalism.
On TikTok, there's a growing wave of Chinese users, many of them fluent in English, who are posting side-by-side comparisons of life in China versus America. They're showing how propaganda, income inequality, and civil unrest in the US mimic the chaos that America once mocked in other nations. One viral trend shows American homeless encampments with captions like, "Land of the Free," juxtaposed with clean, organized Chinese cities. What's more shocking is that many of these videos aren't inflammatory. They're informational. Chinese users are calmly pointing out contradictions between what American leaders say and what the data actually shows. And millions of American TikTok users are finally asking, wait, is this true?
I saw these clips of ICE going in and just fucking ripping these people out of their homes, and mothers and grandmothers and children screaming, no warrant. If fellow U.S. citizens are like, what are you doing? They like intimidate them, fucking arrest them and shit. This is like Gestapo type of stuff. And it just blows my mind that there's a certain ugly segment of the American population that's enjoying watching these families getting ripped out of their homes. And you somehow think that America is going to be better if this is done. Like, so what? So they took those people out. They're taking these brown people out that are living week to week. And somehow you feel like if they get them out of the country, your boss who's not paying you a living wage will suddenly start paying you a living wage. What would be a great thing is if everybody read up on the history of these fucking assholes that have run these companies. They have not wanted to pay Americans a living wage ever. They've never wanted to pay us a living wage. And the only reason why they do is because there's laws. And the only reason why there is laws is because people died during protests to start unions. And these fucking psychos that run these companies didn't want to pay a living wage, and eventually they took their factories out of the country so they could go back to not paying a living wage in the form of sweatshop labor. And now they're eventually working their way towards this. The same billionaires that didn't want to pay in the 1800s, way back to the feudal system, they've never wanted to pay you. They don't want to fucking pay you, and they just keep blaming people that don't look like you, that don't have any money or any sort of control over your life, and my people keep believing it. It's unfucking believable. Immigrants are not the reason why you can't make your rent. You can't make your rent because the guy that fucking employs you is not paying you enough money. He's not keeping up, or she's not keeping up with the rate of inflation. The sad fucking thing is there's enough money, there's enough food, there's enough shelter for everybody. But these super rich cunts want too much for themselves. And they're heartless. They don't give a fuck. And when you start to tell them, hey, you're not paying us enough money, they go, oh, look at those fucking brown people over there. If we could just get them to stop jumping over a wall or get them out of their houses. If we could tear apart their families without a warrant, then I would somehow magically start paying you enough money where you could live comfortably and have health insurance. Unreal. And I got to tell you, these fucking people that are just watching this stuff, and you don't think that eventually, if you just co-sign on an agency being able to do that, just barge into somebody's fucking house like that, just start lining people up, asking questions, no warrants, just total intimidation, right? If you're signing off on that, you have to understand, do you really think that that's just going to stop there? Let's say they got all the illegal immigrants out of this country. That work still has to be done. So now who's doing that work? And what is the rich guy doing? Do you think he's going to pay American citizen wages? Is he going to let one nickel roll out of his pocket? Is that Has that been your experience watching these super rich people? Just out of curiosity. Anyway, it's tragic. This is just a really mean, ugly, I can't even say period, I guess exposure, that it's just brought all of these super fucking overtly racist nationalist psychos to the forefront.
Was it China who destabilized and destroyed multiple countries on a global scale? Was it China who performed multiple coups in multiple countries? Was it China who dragged everyone into a pointless war in Afghanistan for decades? No, that was the US. The US's imperialism and its consequences are far-reaching and never-ending. America is a global terrorist. The things that they have done to global citizens is atrocious. I implore you, look into the book Jakarta Method so that you can get an idea of just how much the US has fucked with other countries and the damage that they have done. The US is a bully, and everybody is sick of them.
Here's where things get wild. Chinese users are watching the American political machine crank up, and they're saying, "This looks a lot like our old cultural revolution." They're not wrong. Book bans, cancel culture, political purges, surveillance, and corporate government alliances are starting to mirror tactics once used by Maoist China. Even the Chinese government's own media has made this claim, saying, "America's greatest enemy is itself." It's the kind of statement that sounds like propaganda until you realize Americans are increasingly losing trust in their media, their institutions, and even their own votes. To outsiders, the US looks like a nation spiraling into self-destruction while pretending it's the moral leader of the world.
I was teaching an American history class to a group of mostly Chinese students, and this was in 2016, which is 8 years ago. But it was a rough election year, very divisive. Everything was super negative the entire year. And I showed him a map like this. I don't think it was this exact map. And I showed him some similar ones at the state level where you could see that the cities were blue and the areas outside the cities were red. And these were students who were extremely intelligent and extremely curious about the United States, and they didn't seem to know all that much at that point. They were just very, very curious about why the United States was so powerful. They had heard so much about the American political system, and then they were living in it and living through it, and they looked at it and they said, why is it so divided by urban and rural? That's such an obvious divide. Shouldn't the leaders figure out ways to bring people in cities and people out in the country together? I mean, they obviously have different lifestyles, different perspectives. That's obviously why it's so divided. Why do the leaders keep it so divided? And they kept insisting on this question. And I kept saying, well, I mean, it's different people, there's different perspectives, there's different this, there's different values, there's different this. But the point they kept making and they kept going into was that, isn't it the function of leadership to bring the two different groups together? I mean, it seems like such an evenly divided group of people that in the cities you have blue and in the outside the cities you have red. They couldn't believe, they couldn't see a red city, which there basically isn't, and they couldn't really find too many blue areas outside of cities. And so they kept making this point about, what's going on? Why would the leadership allow the country to stay so divided? And I never really had a good answer for them.
When I went to China in the summer for the first time, I stayed in the Guangzhou area, and I wasn't really sure if I should, really leave my hotel or not, but I was so surprised that everyone, including the women, were like, just letting you know, like, if you want to go somewhere, like, don't be worried. Obviously, like, they were so courteous, and the people there were so helpful, because I went there on a work trip as well, but they were like, you could literally go anywhere at night, you'll be fine, you'll be safe. And as a woman who is traveling alone, that's not something that I naturally will do, because I have an instinct to not do that. I grew up in Vancouver. I've been through LA a million times, all these kinds of places, and the number one thing they always tell you, especially as a woman traveling alone, is to be extra vigilant. Being in China was the first time that I did not have that like extreme vigilance behind me, because going to big crowded areas, I noticed that everyone felt safe. There was no weird like clutching, being close kind of feeling. Being in an area where there was 5 giant malls back to back, like every single one of them had an Apple store, so they were huge malls. Not only was everything super clean, but as someone who grew up in North America and, you know, has been to all the major cities as far as like, you know, visiting and like living in them, not all of them, I don't know why I said that, but has been to a lot of them, I could not mentally grasp the fact that there were no gates and bars and cops in this major area. My brain could not comprehend it. Looking at these buildings and being like, okay, so there's no gates that you have to close and make sure that no one like breaks the window randomly at night, like that is a foreign concept. Quite literally a foreign concept.
You'd think Americans would be defensive, but here's the twist. Many are actually agreeing. TikTok is full of duets and stitches of Chinese creators where Americans go, damn, we're the bad guys now. There's a growing sense of embarrassment and disillusionment. After decades of exporting democracy, freedom, and capitalism, many Americans are now realizing that they've been sold a dream that no longer exists. Rent is unaffordable. Wages are stagnating. Healthcare is a financial death sentence. And now foreigners are posting videos of their better public transport, better education systems, and safer streets, while Americans are dodging medical debt and mass shootings. TikTok has become a digital town square where the global community holds up a mirror to the US, and the reflection isn't pretty.
Okay, y'all, I just want to jump on her real quick because I've been watching some Chinese videos that has been spitting some fire. And, you know, the girl is going through this process right now, so I only got a few minutes to talk. All right. One, I watched some of them Chinese videos. I went on that Chinese app and was just checking them out. And, I mean, they is destroying the United States of America. One of the guys said, okay, how many products, this is all the products that I have of United States in my home. And it was like one little thing like this. And he said, how many products from China do you have in your home? He was like, y'all are so incompetent. Basically, he says that your government tells you to fear the boogeyman per se, meaning he said all you who vote red tells y'all to fear the person who is melanated and that they're taking your jobs, that they're doing this, they're doing that, meaning the Mexicans and the people that work on farms for farmers who voted red and biting their hands off and destroying their own personal wealth. Because he said the one thing that in America that people have been programmed to believe is racism. He said, and he's not saying that racism doesn't exist. It does exist. What he is saying is that these politicians know that racism will push the envelope, will keep them in power, keep their pockets filled. And while they're pushing these racist tropes and they're pushing all this propaganda is being pushed out there, China is basically, that's how they came out and spilled the beans about the purses and just saying, you know, this is how these purses are getting made. These are where they're getting made at in China, you know, or in different countries, you know, but they're not getting made in the United States of America. And then one of the other guys, which was shocked me and it kind of like made sense. He said, MAGA never wants to believe that people of color make sense. They don't want to believe nothing they're saying. They're like, no, that's a lie. That's not true. When in fact, he was like, I have to applaud melanated people because those are the ones that have been speaking truth to power. He was like, that's how they get y'all in the United States of America. He was like, all these rich oligarch billionaires have been buying their products. If they have companies, they've been buying their products in China forever. He said China and America have been, you know, sharing and selling products back and forth for decades. The only difference is that in China, they took that money and put it into their roads, their bridges, and they made sure that their people ate too. Like their people are eating too. Or people are doing good over there. But I mean, and then he showed his apartment. I was like, and then he said how much he pays for his apartment. I was like, what? His apartment looked like a mini mansion. And he was like paying, like he pays like $600-700 a month. And then this other lady, he was showing this other girl's apartment. It was like a mini condo, but she was paying like $250. And I was like, what is happening? They talked about the healthcare system. how they all are good to go, how they make sure their people are taken care of, because their mindset is that if their people are taken care of, then they're going to get up, they're going to go to work, and they're going to do the things that's necessary to sustain their economy. But here he's saying that here in the United States of America, rich people just want to get richer and nobody's caring about nobody. Crime runs rampant and it's like they don't care. And he says, and people keep putting the same people in position because they want to believe that those people are the ones that are looking out for their best interests, when in fact, that's not true. He's like, when people tell you, and you just think of someone in China saying, when people tell you who they are, believe them. He's like, when you have someone sitting in office for multiple years, like they get elected, they spend their time in office, and then they leave, then it's time to revote them in, and you vote them in again, knowing that they didn't do anything, just because you don't want someone that might be, say, in the Democratic Party in office. He said common sense would tell a person with an education. He said that's why your own people, and he mentioned E, said, and V, they both said that's why they wanted to outsource get their people from Asia and other countries, because people in America are dumb. Because common sense would tell you, if a person's sitting in office and you can't see, and you can't even pull up anything online, what they did for your state or your city or whatever, but then because you don't want to, just because out of racism or just being petty, you say, well, I don't want to put a Democrat in there, so I'm not going to vote Democrat. I'm going to just keep this same person in office because even though I know they're not doing a good job. What does that say about you as a person? What does that say about you as trying to build up this country? And see, when he was saying this, it made sense as why the United States is in the situation it's in right now. Why you have billionaire oligarchs trying to control this country. Why you have Project 2025 and you have one person as the spearhead of Project 2025, but then now he's over the Office of Budget Management, from what they're saying. And there's even a video out of a prince, like I think he's a prince or some type of, I don't know, I don't want to call him the wrong title, but I know he's like rich. And he's in his everything from Saudi Arabia talking about how this all-white race that this current administration is trying to push, and it's coming from Project 2025, and people who are like right-leaning, neo-Nazi type thinking that, oh, it's supposed to be one race. No, that's not how this country came about. He even was saying that all that's going to do is end in bloodshed, and that he said it's not good. It's not going to help your country. He said people are not thinking, because this is not before slavery. This is way past slavery. And a lot of people are not going to sit down and let anybody take, regardless of race, take from them. But after saying that, one of the things that someone was saying was that one of the guys, Chinese or this rich person, was saying is that sit back. He said, ask yourself, when you sit back and you really think about things, if you live in the states, like he mentioned, like they mentioned the states, Kentucky, he mentioned Louisiana, he mentioned all red states, their education system is one of the lowest in the country. The lowest. He said, and they're the poorest in this country. But they keep putting, he said, but then they talked about the people that's been in office for them. It's the same people. But you're still poor. You still got low education systems, and your people are still poor. Nothing's being built in your cities. And you wonder why. Because they have fed you, oh, Mexicans are the boogeyman. And it causes your inner devil to vote against your own interests, to keep them in power, keep their pockets fed, keep their family eating, while yours don't. While you lose everything you worked for, but they okay. Because see, this country, based on what this guy was saying, he said in China, we've been made to be the boogeyman in American culture. He was basically saying something to the fact that, but Chinese people believe in looking out for each other. And they don't have the racism going on. They don't have the craziness that, like, even though, there's issues and things like that, they say that have happened in China, it's not to the magnitude that it is in the United States of America. And I'm like, I was just sitting there like, I'm telling y'all, get a chance, get on those Chinese apps. And if you're a MAGA, I would say especially, you might want to get on those Chinese apps, because some of them guys on there is just preaching. Like, they is not, and it'll make you say to yourself, like, wait a minute, if you're living in a trailer park, but you've had the same person in office for 7 terms, and you're in the House, in the Senate, and all those places, and your mayor, everybody has been one party, and you keep putting them in office, look around and ask yourself, why are you not getting ahead? And if you're out there working, if you're someone who goes to work, gets up, goes to work, but you just seem to not be able to get ahead, and there's nothing else, like your area, there's no new roads, no bridges, nothing new is being done. Except for, yeah, let's remember, like he did say when Joe Biden was in office, they did get roads and bridges money approved to put in all states, not just blue states, all states. And then ask yourself also, too, why is it that blue states pay more in taxes and red states pay less? And then blue states have to, the taxes that they put into the pot, a lot of those taxes go to red states. But yeah, and still a lot of people on here believe that, oh, blue states are the boogeyman. When in fact, if it was not for blue states, a lot of y'all wouldn't be functioning. Your cities would be run down, tore down, and everything. Yes, and mainly a lot of southern states. So I'm saying this to say that when you get a chance, like I said, go on them Chinese apps. I was sitting here like, oh, Jesus, like, if I could move to China, I would be out. I'm telling you. Not even just to go visit. You know what I mean? Not to move, but just to visit. Because our country, based on Chinese perspective, is in a toilet right now. Y'all stay blessed.
Now let's be clear. The Chinese Communist Party isn't exactly an innocent observer here. They've got a whole department dedicated to influencing public opinion abroad. But here's what's crazy. Some of their criticisms of America are actually resonating. When a one-party authoritarian state starts sounding like a reasonable critic of a democratic republic, that's when you know something's gone off the rails. Chinese media is calling out America's failing infrastructure, racial tensions, homelessness crisis, and wealth inequality, and millions of Americans are nodding along. Are they exploiting America's flaws for soft power points? Absolutely. But they're also pointing out truths that even American media refuses to acknowledge. And in the digital age, that's a powerful weapon.
The Chinese government just had a press conference and announced that the only enemy to America is America itself, which is so true. We are our own cancer breeding here. We try to blame it on the Chinese. The Chinese don't care about us. You know what's funny about it? They say, oh, we need to ban this app because of national security, because it's a data breach. They're gonna take all of our information. But it's okay when Meta takes all of our information, when Instagram takes all of our information, when Facebook takes all of our information. And it's also interesting that Representative McCall invested heavily in Meta before the TikTok ban. So shouldn't we, if we're doing this, we're opening it up to this Americans, because we're all the Chinese spies, right? Shouldn't we investigate any senators who took money or invested money in Meta before all this went through? Huh? Mark Zuckerberg? Nobody's going to your app. We all are tired of it. But I think we, the people, need to push back against these politicians.
How is the crime in China? Is it safe as a single woman you go home by yourself in the middle of night? I just finished a drink with my friend, and right now it's 2:27 in the middle of night, like a.m. Absolutely safe. As long as you don't do any stupid, you don't get like super drunk and you try to get involved into any fight or like don't do any stupid things. Yes, safe.
My first American friend told me she probably has to stop going to school because she has to pay lots of bills and the tuition fee is very expensive. We talked a lot, and I feel she's nice, she's lovely, she's smart, she's educated. I just don't understand. How can US government waste such talented human resources like her? They're actually killing the hopes from young people of this nation. I'm very angry. Why those capitalists push American students so badly? You need to keep people survived first. Then you make money, okay? As the Chinese spy, I'm teaching you how the things work. Watch and learn.
So what now? America finds itself in an identity crisis. Its own people are disillusioned. Foreigners are schooling Americans on their history, civics, and basic economic realities. The rest of the world sees a broken empire trying to save face. And the US government? It's clamping down harder on TikTok, on dissent, on narratives they can't control. But maybe, just maybe, this is the wake-up call America needs. If it takes TikTok videos from Chinese college students to make Americans rethink their system, then so be it. Because here's the real kicker. Freedom isn't about chanting slogans. It's about listening, even when the truth comes from the other side of the world. Adios, besties.